I wish that was that one? I got 3 years out. They're nice.
I've got about 4 boxes. She said you were getting hamstrings.
They're all in line.
Don't judge me.
Dab, you hear us okay? Yes, I can.
All right, it's 6:30, so we'll get started. Call the meeting to order. Bow your head. Julie's going to say a prayer for us.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this night. We thank you for getting everyone here safely, and we pray for a safe trip home despite the weather. We thank you for being here with us. We thank you for blessing us with the community we have and the children that we're responsible for looking out for. We pray that you would guide decisions here and that you would give us an instinct for what you would have us do and what is best for the kids here. Grant us wisdom and discernment in all that we do. We pray blessings upon our staff and our administration. Grant them peace and energy and endurance. And also we want to thank you for them and the sacrifices they give to help the students who live in Mercer County. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
And for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Palmer.
Palmer.
Here, my bad, I have it up mute.
Barry.
Here.
Bounds.
Here.
Munson.
Here.
Smock.
Here.
Wagner. Here. Yates.
Okay. At this time, are there any additions or deletions? I have none. Okay. Zero list. Okay, for public comment, just a reminder, a couple things. One, 5 minutes per person, 30 minutes max. And then the other thing, just to remind everybody, this is not a question and answer time. So when you get up as in the public, you make your statements, and the board members will refrain from answering questions, and then the board members will have their opportunity as well. So I thank you for that. And with that, I have Ashley Della. Fuller. Ashley Della.
Thanks for giving me the chance to speak to you tonight. I see before me a board and a superintendent that has had many unforeseen and weighty decisions put upon them in the past couple of years. And so I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate everything you do, and that you do pretty thanklessly. So I know you've dealt with a lot, and I do appreciate it. As well as the administration and teachers and other staff. Every day I think about how grateful I am that we go to school in this community. I was supposed to speak last time, and we got sick unexpectedly, as been known to happen the past couple years. We were pretty sick. I was, but we're here and we're okay, and I'm glad to be here tonight. I wrote a long letter. I'm not going to speak that long tonight. Much has already been said by many people about the abundance of evidence that supports small schools connected to communities or neighborhoods, if in larger towns. A great deal of academic research has gone into what is best for kids. Over and over, in many ways, small and updated schools come out on top. People want to be connected to their schools. Schools are better when they're connected to their community. Certainly, we've all learned in the past couple of years how important connection is to all of us. This board is made up of people who care tremendously for our children and our communities. We've all lived through these times that have felt very divided, but I know at the end of the day that more unites all of us here than divides us. We all care about our schools and our towns both. I believe that you as the board have an unprecedented opportunity to make a decision that will unite most of us and benefit all kids. I encourage you to do the right thing and choose to keep both of our wonderful grade schools, do all needed updates plus more, listen to the teachers and tell you what they need in these schools to make them even better. And then use the remaining funds to invest significantly in our high school that desperately needs it. Thank you.
Thank you. Zach Frick.
Hi, much like Ashley, I wanted to bring up some other topics in addition to the elementary schools. I think we've kind of beat to death on our end on that's not something we'd like to see, not something we think is necessary. One thing to point out is obviously with the savings of the $1 million, actually half of that comes by just closing Joy, which could be done without even closing any of the elementary schools. And with that, as a community, we'd like to see work put in the high school and a lot of resources set there. In the Building and Grounds Committee meeting that I went to, the architects indicated that this needed to be something that the whole board could get behind. In various talks with several of the board members, it sounds like the high school is something everybody can get behind. I think it's something the community can get behind. And also from a tax basis too, I mean, it's something that I could see myself pushing for, campaigning for, and helping with driving that for getting more tax revenue for a new high school or a large addition and a lot of money spent in the high school. I'd like to see that be a real topic of discussion in the coming future rather than dumping more money into an elementary school that's not really needed, but actually see money dumped into the high school that is needed right now. Thank you.
Is there anybody else public comment would like to make any comments at this time? Okay. Any board comments at this time?
I'm gonna beat the McSeef drum again. We added, the foundation added a PayPal button. So, thank you, Angie. So there is PayPal now if you would like to make a donation to the Education Foundation, and it's on their page of the website. And so make it easier, instead of mailing in a check, then you can use PayPal to make a donation. And just as a reminder, the Education Foundation is doing a matching grant with Lucer Flake. Every dollar you donate is matched by Lucer Flake Foundation. And so it would be great if we could double double the contributions to the foundation with this. And so that was one thing that has changed. I thought I'd make sure everyone knew about. The second thing, I just heard a little bit ago, the 7th grade Scholastic Bowl just got the travel banner from Orion tonight, and they are undefeated currently. So we got another travel banner coming home to Mercer County Junior High.
Awesome.
I haven't heard the results of 8 tonight, so I'm sorry.
I have, and I lost.
Okay.
We got a little bit lost. That's where I came to speak.
Oh, okay.
Any other board comments at this time? Hearing none. I didn't see any correspondence. Okay. Moving to item 6, approval of consent agenda. Is there any items that any board member wishes to separate out for discussion and vote at this time? Hearing none, I accept a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Ballmer,
Yeah.
Berry,
Yes.
Bounds,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
Smock,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Yates.
Motion carries. Moving to item number 7, committee reports. Finance Committee. Any questions on the Finance Committee? Okay, moving to item number 8, information discussion items. 8.1 FOIA requests. I think I saw 2 of them in there.
Was the first 2 pages the same one?
Was it the
Or
same
was it
one?
2 different organizations asking for the same information? The retired teachers list.
That just includes,
That was just the one.
Just that one.
yeah, okay, same.
It wasn't the local.
All right.
On the second FOIA request, did we answer that?
Yes.
Could you forward the answer to the board?
And I think I did copy it, because I think, Mike, did you receive that one as well?
I received the email. I don't know that, you said you were gonna respond to it. I think I
And I
responded.
can copy that.
Thank you.
Okay, moving to 8.2, IASB March Division Meeting.
This is just a reminder that that division meeting is coming up, and if you would like to attend, please contact Angie. That's being hosted by Bradford. For this section.
Okay, any questions on that? Discussions? Okay, moving to item 8.3, proposed downtown Aledo 2022 TIF.
I just wanted to make sure that the board and public were aware that the city of Aledo is in the process of creating a new TIF. They are having their public meeting in that regard next week, and I've included in your packet for you the proposed map. You've also got in a secondary message a description of the TIF that expired on December 31st, and you can see some of the differences there. Much of that remains the same.
I didn't think they could do the same area.
It can't be exactly the same, no.
Oh, but it can include.
It can include portions, and there are differences that have to be shown there. One of those is the residential, the piece to the north is the proposed residential development.
Right.
There's a large undeveloped area that is behind the Buttonwood property that includes that section. You'll see the comparison of the old to the new, the industrial portion of that includes the commercial and industrial portion includes the Walmart, General Grinding Machine. Those are all carved out of the proposed TIF.
So the red means that's not a part of the TIF.
Everything inside that green boundary.
What are these red shaded areas mean? Like Walmart and looks like Brookstone.
Well, those red pieces in there, I believe, because of where I see 94, those appear to be inside the green boundary, and that would probably be like the new Casey's and McDonald's and Brookstone. Those properties look to be included inside the boundary.
Okay.
But the only information that I have at this time is what's included in that announcement.
So we don't know why there's these red areas.
Yeah, I don't know if that's just the color coding on their GIS or if that has some significance.
There's 2 other little spots too.
Okay.
Do they have any dollar figures attached to it?
No, I don't know what the estimated initial tax value is. The district and all the taxing bodies.
This is bigger than the last one.
Excuse me, Tab?
This is a lot bigger than the last one.
Well,
Yes.
is it though? Because they took out
Yeah,
all this.
I've been to 50 kid meetings, and this is definitely bigger.
Okay. And what
And who's behind
City.
the city is working to develop this.
Well, we know it's not the city, which bank is pushing it, which person is pushing it, because this is, oh my God. Another 2. More fun.
So what I'm interested in finding out is what impact that may have, because the district and other taxing bodies will continue to receive money off whatever the base EAD is for the TIF. What taxing bodies don't get is any of the growth, the increment over the lifespan of that tax increment district. And so it's important, especially when we talk about bonding over time and borrowing, that we have a good estimate of what those are so that we can figure those into any calculations going forward.
One just tells you that it's bigger, and it takes in the whole city almost, instead of just a portion of the block north of Main Street. We go the 2 blocks, and then that whole thing goes out.
Tab, you gotta speak up a little bit when you're talking, please.
Well, that's the best I can do from here. It is bigger, and it's a lot bigger. I think they got rid of the other one. They just added it. I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Okay, any other discussion on that? Moving to item 8.4, summer school updates.
We have set the dates for our summer school program. They will run June 6th through June 30th. We've got, and we'll run those programs like we did last year. They're Monday through Thursday from 8 to 12:30. We've got a little bit of a change with respect to where those will be located this year because of the move going on with the 7th and 8th grade classrooms into this building and 5th grade classrooms to the elementaries, and all the work, of course, that's going to go on in the hallways at the high school. But I think we will be able to support the junior and senior high students in the high school. We'll have to probably have to utilize maybe a different entrance. Not sure about that yet. It'll depend on the scope of some of that work. And also at our elementary schools, will be supporting those programs like they did in the past. In addition to those, I think we're going to receive what's called a Jumpstart pre-K grant through the ROE, and what that will allow us to do is to support classroom during that same period of time and same hours for fourth graders for the 5-year-olds that are going to be moving into kindergarten for next year. So some of those students out of our 4-year-old pre-K classroom, as well as other students, would be eligible for that Jumpstart pre-K program.
The various buildings, the same building, like both elementaries.
Our plan is both elementaries. And we anticipate 20 students based on our parent feedback.
20 total, or?
20 total in that Jumpstart program.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion on that? Item 8.5, facility study update.
Okay. I'm going to try to cover a little bit of the ground that Gray had hoped to cover with you at our twice postponed building and grounds meeting that now is currently scheduled for next week. But I want to review with you some pieces of information about kind of where we're at. The first handout that I included for you was from early in our long-term facility study, and this was after they completed their surveys of the buildings and interviews with staff. We've got at the top of that page what they determined in their study that we needed to complete in health, life, safety upgrades across all 5 buildings, including and a 6th that we included the VOTEC building. And that's where they arrived at $12.7 million figure. And again, that was what they determined from the survey. Those are not health, life, safety amendments that are on file that we have to complete at this point. What you see below that are outstanding health, life, safety items. So these are amendments that are on file with the State Board of Education. In there, you'll see that we have about $50,000, less than $50,000 of required work to complete at each of the elementaries. Only a handful of dollars here. In fact, I think that's been completed because that was the connection of our fire alarm systems to a monitoring service. The junior high and the high school work that we needed to complete. And again, some of that has already been addressed, some of that is being addressed even this summer, because as I said, these were the numbers from their initial study. That was completed back in 2020. And this is where they arrived at that figure. You know, we talked about that at a number of our meetings, that regardless of what we decide to do, we've got over $14 million worth of work that we know needs to get done. Now, what we've decided in the course of that discussion was that we put out this survey to try and figure out how do we want to approach that. And our survey, remember, we asked about 3 questions. You know, concentrate on the combined elementary school, concentrate on fixing up our 2 elementary schools, or picking various projects at the high school, or some combination of all those things. And we got those results back, and what I included in here were some of the high school project results. Because overall, and we've reviewed this a lot of times, the majority response we got was that we would proceed to look into a combined elementary school. That's not to say that was an overwhelming result, and we spent a lot of time discussing that. There were a lot of people that were undecided about that because they didn't know what those details might be. But we've arrived at that point. We've got to make some decisions to be able to move forward. And I think based on what this board has said at the last couple of meetings that we've had is that you're not willing to ask the taxpayers for additional dollars than we're going to have on hand when we complete our bond issue. So the pool of money that we're looking to do, based on bonds that we are issuing and the money that we have on hand, is somewhere in that $18 to $20 million range. And the combined elementary, the best case scenario that we got from Gray on that was somewhere between $15 and $17 million. A very doable project. But what I've heard from several board members is that doesn't leave us enough money if we go down that road to complete some of the projects that we need to at the high school. And so I think that's kind of what's led us here. If I've got, this is my pot of money that I have to work with, how am I going to move forward with that? And so I included this list of prioritized projects from the high school. And I've also included the letter from the school construction task force that last met in February of 2020. This process was meant to look into funding school construction grants that would be matching at some level. And that level depended on the district's ability to provide matching funds and also on their need. That task force has been on hold since about March 1st of 2020 when the COVID pandemic came into effect. That process has begun to move again, and we have bills in the House that begin to address the school construction task force and matching grants for districts. I don't know when that's going to move. Committee deadlines are this week in the House, but bills never really go away. There's always opportunities to amend, and things could happen in the spring or the veto session that would bring about that process. And we could be eligible for matching grants that would increase that pool of money that we would have to work on these projects. And so I think it's important to take a little pause and see what might become available to us in the near future. There are some things I know we have to do. We've got abatement projects at the high school that we need to complete. We've still got those outstanding amendments at our elementary schools that we've got to take care of. And there are some other issues that have become more urgent, because even if we go down that path, building a new combined elementary school is a 2 to 3 year project from today. If you chose to go down that path today, it's 2 to 3 years out, design and construction. And so we can't just let Apollo and New Boston or the high school sit for 2 to 3 more years. We've sat too long, and we need to be able to move forward and choose a direction. But I think this does present an opportunity for us to begin to move, but also to know that we have funds on hand if a matching grant comes available. And this is similar to the process that Illini West went through a couple years ago. Now, their referendum failed because they were asking for the money at that time, but they did ask for the 5-year authority to bond $17 million, assuming that it would be matched in that time period by the state in order to construct their new high school. Since that referendum failed, they don't have that authority, but I suspect they'll be looking at that again because they still have building needs. So my recommendation to you is that we pause any direct action on what way we're going to go, because we really don't have enough information on some of those items that I know that there are at least some of you that want to act on. But I think it's a little premature without knowing what that bigger picture is.
If we put a pause on everything, instead of having a June referendum, when would be a next time we would have a vote on anything, or could have a vote on anything?
Spring of 2023.
April.
Is that 18 to 20 million that you say we have a pool of money? Does that include the health life safety bonds?
Yeah, that includes bonds that we've issued. We're in the process. We're issuing tonight 15 million worth that we'll have on hand.
Right.
We'll have authority for about another 3.5.
Then we had already issued some health life safety bonds, correct?
We currently have about 1.2 million in our health life safety fund. We currently have in excess of $1 million in our O&M fund. We currently have about 1.5 million in our capital projects funds. So we have funds to make sure that we can do the needed repairs and some smaller projects.
That's aside from the 18.
Yeah, that's aside from what we're going to be issuing here. So that's why I say we're closer to that $20 million pool to work with.
If that money became available, though, we could also put that towards a new high school as well, if that was the direction.
That could be.
Yeah.
Is there stipulations on that one? So first off, they haven't voted for what they do. What's the
Yeah,
stipulations on that?
I think that's all speculation right now. We haven't seen anything yet. I included the excerpt, the executive summary from the report they issued in 2020, but that doesn't mean any of that is what happens in 2022.
I mean, that's not something that legislature makes the rules on. They just pass the bill and they rewrite the rules for that, or?
The Capital Development Board writes that.
Well, one nice thing is, don't they usually typically look at shovel-ready projects, and we would probably
They
consider-
do, and they typically, like districts, have to come up with their match under the past rules, districts had to come up with their match within 2 years of being awarded that grant.
We'd have it right away.
You'd have it right away.
The last grant was Knoxville, what they got, their high school, the full grant. It wasn't a half and half, was it?
I believe they got almost 70%.
Okay.
The current update on that allows districts and special education cooperatives to apply only when funding is available. That was one of the things in the past. Everybody could get in this big line and only a little bit of funding might be available, and so the line is 100 districts deep and they can fund 2 this year. What this does is stops that. Eliminates entitlement, revises the match to use evidence-based funding, which benefits districts like us that are a low tier 2 district, almost tier 1.
So we'd be ahead of Naperville getting another pool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it because of our, what are we at fully funded, 70%? What the state believes we should be?
We're not quite the same.
Not quite 70.
Yeah.
And all the districts around us are close to 90.
Some districts around us are much higher than that, yeah.
Hopefully that works in our favor.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Move to item number 8.6, curriculum course syllabus update.
I'm going to let Mrs. Day and Mr. Sedam talk a little bit about that. I think we're close, ready?
Yeah, ours, I mean, our course syllabus stuff is in our course description book. We've been using it as we started course requests for next year. Angie, maybe I'm wrong. I think our new one is on the website.
Yes.
And say I can't remember for sure. Things are a little bit of a blur some days, but so we compiled those in with the course description. So you'll see the title and the numbers and the course description. And then underneath it, you'll see the units of study with it for everything that we have in there. For ours, I don't know about Tim's of the junior high.
Ours is in the same place, the same format, title of course, the description, the unit study below. We've actually started with our 6, 7, 8 group, also updating that for next year already to get that up and running at the start of the school year. So we actually tackled that last. Ours is updated also online, isn't
I
it?
don't have it yet
You don't have it?
online. No. I'll email you tomorrow.
It will be tomorrow.
Is it including the exploratory classes or
The mini courses?
the extra class, the history ones and the ones that are
Yeah.
not the
Yep.
main curriculum?
Thanks for doing that. Any other questions on that? Okay, item 8.7, Devry dual credit update.
Yeah. These next two items, we had an inquiry about those. We had hoped to start our collaboration with Devry on their certificate programs during this school year, but they've run into some problems with the Board of Higher Ed approving their program. There were some program requirements that were changed, and we last signed amended agreements with Devry last fall. You know, Mrs. Day had some communication with Lou back in December, and we're still hoping to be able to have something to move forward with for next fall, but at this point that's looking more difficult because we're already scheduling classes and developing schedules for next year. So that's some of the hang up that we're having dealing with the Board of Higher Ed and their requirements for dual credit programs.
What are their concerns? The Board of Higher Ed, what are they concerned about?
The last issue we were aware of is it's the remote facilities where the instruction is being housed. We've had to provide extensive facility data to them. Even though the instruction is remote, they're not sending an instruction on campus and it's only our students. But that's the same issue that Sherrard and United are having with trying to get this off the ground as well.
All right, well, hopefully we'll get that.
I did have if it were to go ahead, what time block are we looking at for when the kids would participate in that?
Like time of the day?
Yeah, like during certain classes during the day,
I have no idea.
Or after
It
time?
would depend on the kids. It would depend on how, if United and Sherrard get in on it too. You know, we'll need a block of kids to make it worth the Devry's time as well. And so our hope is between the 3 districts, we can get a handful of kids and coordinate those together. And probably do, you know, a double block during the day. But it really just depends on if we can get it off the ground and what kids it is and how that
And
plays out.
some of that instruction was designed to, it could be asynchronous with a synchronous component, maybe not on a necessarily on an everyday basis, but on a once or twice weekly,
Right.
or some hybrid kind of structure to better fit district schedules, particularly when we're working with 3 different high schools.
Would it fit under the co-op area? I mean, would they have to take the co-op class?
No,
Or is it
no, it
completely
would be
separate?
totally separate from that. It could lead into that in terms of like a work experience later, possibly, or depending on how their schedule plays out, but it initially would be separate.
Item number 8.8, code camp.
And this code camp is something that High Tech Small Town, I know is trying to offer this summer for junior high age students. My only knowledge at this point is that they're still seeking an instructor for that program. What I included there is the advertisement that I received in their newsletter. I think that's the same one you subscribe to as well, Julie. But right now, that's the only information that I'm aware of going forward with that. But we hope that there's going to be an opportunity there for kids that are interested in learning how to program.
I assume like if that did go through, so that kids get some things at home or through teacher reads or something,
Yeah,
announcements.
we'll certainly send out some announcements if we can get some more information.
We actually had a meeting in our building to talk to certain kids that went through our mini courses in the keyboarding, the small section coding that we had of interest that we'll be contacting as well.
So, yeah, it's too bad. I thought they had an instructor already.
And they may by now. This is almost a month-old announcement, and I haven't been in touch with anyone, or no one's been in touch with me from the facility yet.
Move to action items. Item 9.1, public school calendar.
Okay, you have a recommendation for the 22-23 school calendar. Calendar committee met a couple weeks ago to discuss some different options. The staff was surveyed on a couple different calendar options, and this is the one that came back as a recommendation. It includes a more traditional spring break time at the end of the third quarter. With that factored in there, it actually does a better job of balancing the length of each of our quarters. You see the number of days in there. That hasn't always worked out that way. If we try to block that time at Easter. But what this also does is it allows us to match many of the districts around us. Of the 15 districts in the Wausau Co-op, we're the only district that didn't take a March type spring break. It also allows us to take the Good Friday, the Monday at Easter that we traditionally have, and finish before Memorial Day weekend, which is something that I know the staff has always been in favor of.
Any discussion?
I guess, and I asked this question earlier, but with the emergency days, and, sorry, my computer's not working, but there were only 2 prior to Christmas and then 3 at the end. So was there a reason why no others were built in? Again, the full 10 were like options.
Yeah, and we've gone back typically and factored those in when we have the calendar description that we'll put up so that we can build those in. The online system only accepts the 5 required emergency days. And I think in answering that question, I'd also mention that we do have 5 remote learning days, e-learning days that we can use anytime we want. And we did that earlier this school year, January 5th, that Wednesday right after we came back. That was an e-learning needs to be considered as an e-learning day, but it's weather related. I think all of our families are used to us calling them remote days because that's something that we've been pretty familiar with for the last couple of years.
Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, accept the motion to approve the calendar as presented.
I move to approve the public school calendar for 2022-2023 as presented.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Barry,
Yes.
Bounce,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
Smock,
Yes.
Wagner,
No.
Yates, Ballmer.
Yes.
Motion carries. Moving to 9.2, approval of high school hallway abatement.
Okay, you should have received this information in a second email. We opened bids on Monday afternoon. And I believe Angie emailed you a letter from our architect, Phillips and Associates, with those results. We had two sets of bids included there. The first is the removal of all remaining asbestos-containing hallway tile at the high school. The second refers to the refinishing of those floors in the same method that we did the lobby a couple of years ago. So that's an epoxy resin style finish on there rather than a traditional floor tile covering. That is a more expensive treatment, but it's also virtually a no maintenance treatment. There's no waxing, so that reduces a lot of ongoing costs and man hours associated with it. I've heard our custodians say it's much easier to keep clean because it really is. It's just running the floor scrubber down the hall. It doesn't show scuffs and dirt in there as much.
So Ironwood was the lowest?
Yes.
They're nearly half of M&O. Was the architect concerned by that? I mean, that's,
No.
seems like a big difference.
And I would agree. All three of those firms have done work for us in the past. Ironwood recently did all of the abatement work, I know Matt said at Rock Ridge.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's one of the things we want to make sure we've got responsible bidders there.
Yeah.
Typically, what that would mean is that M&O is pretty booked up, and they're going to bid the project, but they know they're not likely to get it.
Okay.
So I would recommend there that we accept the low bid from Ironwood Environmental for $37,300.
I move to approve the high school hallway abatement bid awarded to Ironwood Environmental for $37,300.
I'll second. Roll call, please.
Bounce,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
Smock,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Yates, Ballmer,
Yes.
Barry.
Yes.
Item 9.3, approve high school hallway epoxy flooring bid.
Okay, this is the second bid opening that we have that you received. We were a little disappointed. We only received 2 bids on this project in spite of the fact of 20 bidders taking packets. What we found was the problem is many of those bidders were actually strictly floor companies, and when they followed up with that, they typically have not been involved in projects requiring prevailing wage or bid bonds. And the bid bond piece was the big hang-up, so what we've got are general contractors that end up bidding this project.
We'll hire one of those guys to do it.
That will probably hire one of those guys to do it, exactly.
I move to approve the high school hallway epoxy floor covering to Lavadier Construction for the bid of $157,775.
I'll second. Roll call, please.
Munson,
Yes.
Smock,
Yes.
Wagner. Yes. Yates, Palmer,
Yes.
Barry,
Yes.
Mounds.
Yes. Okay, item 9.4.
Okay, at this point, I am going to ask Tim King to speak about the next 3 action items, and I believe Tim has a handout for you that he's going to walk through.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Glad to be here and talk to you about a momentous moment for the district here, obviously, for adopting a big bond sale. I'm sure I told you before, I always enjoy being involved in the kind of once-in-a-lifetime ones where you're looking at doing some major stuff for your district that obviously we hope will be wonderful for your community for years and years to come. And our part of it is just to get the financing in place. We feel like we did a really good job. I'm going to go over the details, but I think we just barely caught the tail end of these really good rates as they started moving up during the pricing kind of thing. So what we have are 3 different bond issues on the table. The first issue for $6.3 million taxable. That's what we're proposing that the district purchase as an investment. Right now you've got a little over $3 million that you own, and so we were thinking somewhere between 2 and 4 is what you could do. So we picked 3 as the additional amount of working cash that you'll be financing. Then the next 2 are what are being sold outside, and we were able to place all of it with banks. So we avoided doing a public offering, we avoided the rating agency fees, the bond insurance, all those kind of extra costs. Still got very good rates, market rates at the time. And frankly, when we were doing this a month ago, it would be another 1/4 or 0.5% higher. If we had actually waited till normally a public offering, you do the sale the day of or the day before you're adopted. So it would have been held yesterday or today. Instead, we were out marketing all this stuff a month ago, right when market rates were just starting to move. So we didn't hit the bottom. I was hoping for closer to 2.5, but we got 2.76. And my son Kendall just worked with Monmouth Roseville last week and ended up with 20-year money at a little over 3. So we feel very good about what you're adopting tonight. We still got phenomenal rates at the end of the day. The 3 banks that participated in the debt certificate purchase, Bank Orion, Sauk Valley, and Morgan Community, all again participated at similar levels in the final purchase. They didn't want the long end, which is not unusual. They didn't want those last 5 years. And thankfully, we've worked very closely with Fairfield National on a whole bunch of Southern Illinois issues, and they have been partial to the long end. They want the yield, and we were able to just send that their direction and say, hey, what would it take for you guys to clean these last 5 years up? And they didn't want much more, like about 10% more on just those last 5 maturities, and that was still a lot better than taking this whole thing back through a public offering process and not having it priced 30 days ago instead of pricing it today. So we are very pleased at the result that we ended up getting at the end of the day. So, and the reason there is a split, the technical reason why is there a B and a C? You are limited to selling $10 million a year of what's called bank qualified bonds. That's a little bit of an advantage to the bank buyers. You get better rates for that because they get some special tax treatment of the bonds. And so obviously we're selling $13 million worth of tax exempt bonds. The taxables don't count against, it's just the tax exempt. So how do we get that accomplished? Well, when we sold the debt certificates, those were in December. This is a calendar year thing. So that first $8.5 million of debt certificates is allowed, if you do it right, is allowed to be refinanced in the following year, and as over and above the new 10 million kind of thing. So, but each individual issue can't be above 10 million itself. So we had to split this thing into 2 pricings. They have to look like they're at least 15 days apart. So tonight, the first resolution will be adopting the actual final sale for the bonds that you're purchasing. The second issue for the 8.9 million looks like the final sale. The 3.2 million looks like it's just a parameters resolution that's authorizing the future sale. That future sale is going to happen on March 3rd, more than 15 days from now. We've already agreed to the pricing. It's all locked in. There's nothing undoing, but that way the board does not have to come back and do a special meeting or something and take additional action. You're authorizing the future sale. That future sale will happen March 3rd with just the officers having to sign the documents at that time. So that's why it's a little unusual that there's two separate issues there for the 8.9 and 3.2 million. At the end of the day, throughout all the issues, you're going to get $5.5 million in your working cash fund. We're selling funding bond proceeds of $9,526,000, which is the $9.5 million of debt certificate money that you already have, and then the $26,000 of interest in this interim period that we're financing to pay off the debt certificates. And then we're refinancing the bonds you own to clear that out and make room to get the schedule settled in exactly where you want it to be. You're paying yourselves 2.75%, which is obviously turned out to be exactly the same as the 2.76. So it's the same rate whether it's sold inside or outside on the bonds that you're purchasing. But on what you're going to purchase, you're now going to earn over $2 million, $2,140,000 of interest over the next 20 years to help obviously get a much better rate of return than what's currently available. We had talked before and again repeated the repayment structure, if you will. This year and next year are 10% increases because we know your assessed valuation is going to increase. You already know your assessed valuation. You've got about a 10% bump this year. Next year, TIF district's coming in, going to be another 10%. After that, 4% a year is what we're guessing for assessed valuation increases. So at the end of the day, in this next schedule, the next page, assuming that all happens, your bond rate should remain right at the 32 cents where it is today. That's what we hope to see. We are planning to use $250,000 of your sales tax annually to make the payments. So the payments are actually $250 more than that 32 cents. And so each year, these are all levied bonds. The full levy will be put on file. Each year, you're going to come back and abate $250,000, or at least appropriate, off of that bond levy on an annual basis to make that decision. So as long as you kind of have the opportunity to tweak it, depending on what EAVs are doing. On an annual basis, use a little bit more, use a little bit less of sales tax to keep that rate constant where you want it to be on all the tax base. Big advantage in today's market of selling directly is that generally we're able to make them currently callable. Certainly the bond issue that you're buying is currently callable, just like the one that we're refinancing. And the big 8.9 series to 3 of the banks is all currently callable, meaning that tomorrow you can pay it off, 6 months or whatever kind of thing. 5 years from now, you need to have any money in. We want to do some restructuring. We can easily do that without having to do an escrow and taxable advance refunding bonds. Morton Community was the only bank that balked a little bit at that, so that's why I separated them into the Series C. That's a 5-year call, which is still very competitive. A public offering is generally 8 or 10 years. So 5-year call just on their piece is the only one that one will be left alone for 5 years ideally and not touched. And then the expense load, because we're doing a direct placement, instead of 2.5% to 4%, 1.8 at the end of the day for all of that. And next page then shows all the detail of the 3 bond issues, and I know that's a lot of fine print, and I apologize, but if you look at the total in the purple, the total payment column, and then the 563 was what last year was, we'll bump to 872,000 and then go up from there, minus the sales tax commitment. We already, you had already plugged in your levy 656,000 for the bond levy. So when this is all said and done, I only need 215,000 this year of sales tax to make that happen. So the documents are establishing the levy. You won't have to do an abatement this year. We're pre-establishing the levy since it's cut off right now. We'll be right at that $656,000. Done deal. Then future years you'll have to decide how much you want to abate, because the full amount will be put on file in the form of a levy. And that's what the graph shows, with the payment increasing at what we just described. And then the purple line on the graph is what is expected to actually be levied on taxpayers, not above that paid by sales tax. Last 3 pages are just the detail. I'm not gonna spend any time on them, but that's just each bond series showing the actual semi-annual principal and interest payments for your bookkeepers, which actually it's annual for the one you buy, so you only have to remember to make one entry a year, but semi-annual for the ones that are sold outside. It's a lot of information quick. Questions, comments?
Just so, just to get it out there, do you want to explain where you got the 4% EAD increase over the year per average?
So that's our, at this point, that's a pure guess, right? But we do believe that you're going to see farmland increases going on consistently over time. So that's a big part of it, and which we expect those to be, that farmland component will be much more than 4% a year. So we think 4% is very doable because you also are having regular growth every year of 1 to 2% plus a couple percent farm ground. We hope that 4% is actually conservative. If anything, you have been experiencing more than that for the last 5 years, and we expect that to continue for at least 15 to 20 more years. Being currently callable, if you get 5, 7, 10 years down the road, and let's say it's only 3.5 every year, that doesn't make much of a difference on a yearly basis. But over 5 or 7 years, that all of a sudden maybe you're looking at 36 or 38 cent bond rate instead of 32, or you're using more of your sales tax towards the payment to keep it at 32 than what you would like to do. Being currently callable, we can always come back 5, 10 years from now and refinance, restructure, stretch them out a little bit, and fix things if needed. So always have that flexibility.
Could you give an explanation on why the farm ground is going to be a consistent thing for the next 15 to 20 years?
So farm ground thing, the legislature, I believe there was a commission, something like that at the state level, but basically 5 years ago, they redid the formula, the assessed valuation formula for farm ground, and determined that it had been way undervalued for many, many years. And when you look at, there's a schedule on the Department of Revenue website that gets updated every year that shows all farm ground at productivity index levels. There's like 30 different productivity index levels, and says what it is currently valued at, what the formula says it's supposed to be valued at, and every one of those shows that farmland is currently valued somewhere between about $300 and $1,000 per acre. The worst round at 300, the best round at 1,000. That all should be valued somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 per acre. It's all about $1,000 per acre undervalued in theory, according to the formula. And there's a limited amount that the legislation passed that allows it to adjust every year. And so it's going to take at least 15 to 20 years before that equalizes, before that full value is retained. So if I were farming, I wouldn't necessarily be happy with that. I grew up on a farm. I feel my family feels that pain, but that is the way that is the current lay of the land, and it's not expected to be changed. So it is what it is.
Any other questions or discussion? Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
So, item 9.4, accept the motion to approve.
I'll move to approve $6,327,400 taxable general obligation school bond series 2022A as presented.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Smock,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Yates, Ballmer,
Yes.
Berry,
Yes.
Bounds,
Yes.
Munson.
Yes.
Just to emphasize, that's the issue that the school district is purchasing.
Right.
Item
Some of that pays
Yeah.
off bonds that
We already-
Item 9.4, accept the motion to approve.
Move to approve the $8,973,100 general obligation school bond Bond Series 2022B as presented.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Wagner,
Yes.
Yates, Palmer,
Yeah.
Barry,
Yes.
Bounds,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
Smock.
Yes.
Passes. Item 9.6.
We'll move to approve the $3,281,500 general obligation school bond series 2022C as presented.
I'll second.
Oh, yeah, well,
Because this, I mean, this is.
Yeah, the agenda says 3,300,000, and this is the actual.
yeah, we just got rounded up.
That's true. You're doing a parameters resolution, so you're approving not to exceed 3.3 million.
Okay, so I should
Yes.
Okay, I'll
Thank you.
revise that dollar figure to 3,300,000.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Yates, Palmer,
Yeah.
Barry,
Yes.
Bounds,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
Smock,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Motion approved. Move to 9.7, approve return to learn plan.
Okay. Tonight, I'm gonna ask you to officially approve changes that we instituted at the beginning of last week. And this included moving to a recommendation for masks. Right now, that's still the current standing for the 145 school districts that were named in the lawsuit that started that process, as well as council's recommendation for 25 additional districts named in a separate but identical lawsuit. Mercer County was one of those 25 districts named in the second lawsuit that has yet to be heard. The second piece of that is suspending the testing of non-symptomatic individuals and the exclusion of non-symptomatic close contacts. Those procedures have been in place since last Monday. The last part of that, and this has been the most controversial, is in regard to masking on school buses. And I sent you guys some additional information on that. The 2021 CDC order that requires those wearing of masks on public transportation is still in effect. That's the opinion of our council, and that's my job to let you know that and to make that recommendation. Passengers and drivers must wear a mask on buses or vans operated by the public or private. The public health regulation cited in the order refers to conveyance. There's a discrepancy there because the transportation regulations for conveyances exempt school buses. The CDC cites the public health order that includes school buses and specifically cites them in their FAQs. Again, that's the opinion of our council. I know there's a lot of controversy around that. I know there are districts that are not requiring masks on their buses. But those decisions don't come without some degree of risk. And that's what you as a board have to decide.
So I want to clarify, so, because I had sent you a piece earlier this week about the transportation
Yes.
department said that excused buses, but you're saying CDC is using
The
the
public health regulations and their definition, we got two competing definitions of what a conveyance is. And so it creates confusion for people. No differently than the judge's order last week caused chaos for everybody. Because in the strictest sense, it doesn't apply to us. We're not named in that ruling. In the strictest sense, even for those districts that were named, it only applies to the named individuals. In a neighboring school district, that only applies to 16 kids. Now, from a practical standpoint, you can't just apply that to 16 kids. From a practical standpoint, if we're facing the same identical lawsuit it's not reasonable for us not to apply them, and our council would agree. This is some of the confusion that we deal with.
So this bus requiring masks, is it based on the presidential executive order?
Yes.
Because it says public transportation does not include school bus service.
And the CDC cites the public
So-
health order.
So they are opposite of the presidential executive order? I mean, it's kind of confusing.
I agree.
I'll move to approve the return to learn as presented.
I'll second.
Well, so I'd like to have more discussion on it.
Okay. You know, it's so, I'm so over this whole damn topic. I mean,
Me too.
you get your way, your kid doesn't have to wear the mask in the school, but you're still complaining. When are people just gonna be happy? The bus, they're on the bus for 45 minutes at the most. They wear a mask for 45 minutes, they get off the bus, they go into the school, they don't have to wear a mask anymore. We're splitting hairs over the silliest little things. I mean, I can't imagine if we had an actual, like, 1920s depression. You think what the kids are going through right now is really difficult. People that grew up in the 20s, they went through hell. So it's the smallest thing. They got to wear a mask on a bus for 45 minutes at the most.
Well, so I would just tell two quick stories. Since we went to recommended mask only, I have a daughter in 5th grade, I have a daughter that's a senior in high school. I left the decision to them. My daughter in high school had a teacher that asked the class, they said, I have health issues, I want you guys to wear masks. My daughter and the whole entire class put their masks on out of respect and decency. My youngest daughter, she goes to this school. I asked her if she wore a mask. She told me, she said, I keep it down here. I said, what are your friends doing? She said, 2 of my best friends won't wear it. 2 of my best friends wear it all the time. I said, well, what are you doing? She said, when we're in line, she's like, I don't want to miss school. I don't want to, offend anybody. She said, I pull it up. She said, if we're close, if we're working together. She said, but when we're not, she said, I take it down. Again, decency, common courtesy, and, unfortunately, this issue has really split us as a country. And so I guess what I took from that is these kids are more resilient and in tune and respectful than a lot of the adults are. And so
Not all of them.
Well,
my 2 kids chose to wear them and had comments made to them both days, so now they don't wear them anymore. And they were doing that for their grandpa who has cancer.
Right.
And so now, the pendulum swings both ways. There's disrespect on both sides, and it's silly that we're still fighting about this. A judge makes an order, we follow it. They still tell us we gotta follow it in another area. If you go to the doctor's office, you're gonna put a mask on. If you go to the courthouse, you're gonna put a mask on. So, it's,
right. And so, and I did misspoke by saying that all kids are respectful, because they're not. Neither are all adults. But I do, and I understand your kids' situations. But if we go by what the masks actually are supposed to do, then if you wear them, then you should be fine. But this is not just my opinion. I had several people when we put the call out, or at least within the next day, that contacted me, and they were sending me the clips, which you did explain, and you sent that out today. I didn't have time to read through it in detail. So it's my obligation to at least bring it up and discuss it more, to make sure that we don't want to split that out and vote differently on that, or separate it out to vote, I guess is what I'm saying. And if I'm the only one that thinks that, then we can move on.
If you wanted to change what's in the return to learn plan, someone would need to make an amendment.
I'm speaking with Bill. I'm over it. I'm sick of it. So I'm just going with the flow. Thankful for what we have. If you show up at the grind tomorrow, you got to put a mask on. That's what the governor tells us to do. I'm gonna do it. I went to the courthouse yesterday. Put a mask on. I got some real things I'd complain about if you want to hear them. I'm with Bill. I'm over it. So I'm thankful. If you want to wear one, great. If you don't, I'm good too. I'm with Bill. So did somebody second him? Okay. I'll third it.
Everything's just so freaking inconsistent, it just drives me insane. But I mean, that just, we're not making any sense anymore. I mean, it's ridiculous. That's just my opinion. I'm just so tired of inconsistency and everything's, okay, you gotta make a special exception here and not over here, and it's nonsense. And so I'm going to move to amend the return to learn plan to make the buses, or masks on buses, recommended. Now, if you don't want that, that's fine. Someone can second it or not, but it can die for a lack of a second. But I'm gonna make the amendment.
And I will second that.
So which motion are we voting on?
You have to vote on the amendment first, and then if it passes or fails, either way, then you vote on the main motion.
So the first vote is on the amendment.
Roger that.
The first vote's always on the most recent, whatever it is.
So you're gonna do a roll call, and this is on whether to allow
Mask
Recommended
on buses.
everywhere.
So
recommended.
yes,
On the
Recommended
bus.
everywhere.
recommended on the bus.
On the buses.
But yes is saying that kids, we don't follow the CDC order,
Right, but they don't have to wear them just on the bus.
just on.
This is just for the bus.
Yeah. And that's when you made the motion.
No.
No.
No, this
That's-
is, I made an emotion to follow exactly what was on here, where so the kids would wear the masks on the bus, but not in the schools. She's amending it to say they don't have to wear them anywhere.
Okay.
Could you just repeat it once, Julie, so I can make sure I have it?
Move to amend the return to learn plan to make masks on buses recommended.
And
And
then
not required.
if we vote on, once we vote on that, if it gets voted down,
And it's just the regular
then it
return
goes
to learn
back to
plan.
this reg. Okay. Does everybody understand what we're doing? Tab, do you understand?
Yes, we're trying to change it in the amendment. So vote yes if you want to have masks optional. No if you just want to wear them, if you want to stay away.
And our legal counsel says they recommend following the CDC order.
Can I make an amendment? We don't talk about masks anymore.
But also, though, I mean, our funding is counting on these federal people that tell us to follow their guidelines.
It could.
The president's
It
executive order says buses are not included in public transportation. CDC says something different. So you got two opposing, and they're both at the federal level, so, you know, it's,
That's why
It's a
you
hot
follow,
mess.
that's why you follow your attorneys. All this time, I've just wanted to follow what the attorneys tell us, because
But our attorney.
Mask is a four-letter word.
Yeah.
The attorney said it is, right? That's what you were sending out earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, the attorney said.
Their
kids on the
recommendation
bus.
at the moment is still to follow the CDC guidance.
All right. So roll call, please.
Ballmer,
No on the amendment.
Barry,
No,
Bounds,
Yes.
Munson,
No.
Smock,
no.
Wagner,
yes.
Yates.
All right. Amendment fails. Now we can go with, you want to restate it?
Yeah, so I move to approve the return to learn dated 2/16/2022 as presented.
I second.
Barry,
yes,
Bounds,
Yes.
Munson,
Yes.
Smock,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Yates, Ballmer.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item 9.8, combining elementary schools.
And I believe on this item, you probably heard most of my discussion when I talked about the facility update and a recommendation to postpone any action on that until we know more. But I know that there are probably some of you that want to discuss that issue and might have some different thoughts.
Well, certainly the hope of having money coming from the state to potentially match or even exceed what we're doing is exciting news. And it sounds like it potentially could come quickly, but there's no guarantees we're going to get that. But it is exciting news, and I'm hopeful that it works out well for us. My stance has always been from the get-go that I didn't want to consolidate the schools. I wanted to keep the grade schools at in Apollo and New Boston. My reason then, my reason now is to not be busing the kids, the little kids in particular, farther than we needed to. I do see, and I'm not going to hash over all the pros and cons. There are several pros to consolidated school, but I also think when it comes down to it, the younger kids, keeping them in their schools, in our two biggest populous areas, I guess is the way to put that, I think is the best solution. I also think that it does, having a great school in the community is important, and I think Aledo, it's important for that. I think it's important for New Boston community as well. Now, I would say that we've been doing this for, are we doing it? Is it 2 years that we've been doing this? But it seems like 5. But what I would say is this has been a long, hard road, and I know people have vacillated back and forth. We've sat back, we've listened. There's a lot of information. This is tough stuff. I also believe no matter what route we take, that we're all taking it to better our district. And I think either route we would go, the pros would outweigh the cons on both sides. If that makes any sense. I just personally feel that the grade schools need to stay where they're at. And saying this with this potential of this additional money, my thought process is, and we've focused on the grade schools pretty much the whole time, knowing the high school needed it. We talked about, do we consolidate, do we keep the schools? And so I still feel like going with the grade schools, either consolidated or individual would I think that's the approach to go. Now, if we vote to consolidate these schools, we aren't going to be able to financially do it, so that is going to flip, as you suggested, and have to maybe focus on the high school, what we can do right now. But my hope is that we, where I stand, where I'm going to vote, and what I hope is we vote to not consolidate, and that way we can utilize the money we already have to put into Apollo and New Boston, get them where they need to be, and by that time we'll still have a good chunk, hopefully, to put on the high school, and maybe we'll get these matching grants and really be able to attack that high school. That's my opinion.
I've been getting contacted. I know there was a petition that went around. I think people in the community were somewhat asleep to what we were looking at. And even when the survey went out, I think the survey was kind of confusing to a lot of people. That's our fault. I'm not trying to blame that on anybody but us. We're the ones who approved that survey. But the outpouring that I've received has been in keeping the 2 elementary schools at their current locations. And I think I received one email from somebody that wanted to consolidate the elementary schools. And now that the city has passed their resolution, and New Boston passed a resolution too, stating they didn't want to lose their elementary schools. You know, kind of trying to put pressure on us from that aspect. It's non-binding, but you know, the outpouring has been there. I'm kind of with Mike on the busing, and I don't want to see kids from one end of the district bust all the way up here, or even kids here bust where they, you know, are right here. So I guess that's where I stand. So I'd like to see us put money into those 2 elementary schools, make them top tier facilities the best we can. You know, there's a lot of upgrades we can do to those to make those schools a great place. And neither one of them are in horrible shape. You know, they're probably the cleanest schools around. You know, when you go to other schools, sometimes they're not as clean as our schools. We do a good job of keeping things up, keeping things painted. So I guess that's where my opinion's at.
Somebody else wants to go first. Sorry, I had to write my ideas down because I would forget something but I just wanted to explain my thoughts. So the idea to close the school came after the 2019 board convention, as Bill mentioned that last month, to reduce number of facilities. As I have mentioned to people who I have talked to in the last month, I never wanted to close a building. I had no problem keeping 5, but as meetings progressed after that, it became apparent I was the only one who thought that way. Everyone else wanted to move in the direction of reducing the number of our buildings. And then in April last year, without being a part of the survey, which we were trying to gauge public opinion, the board closed the Joy building. The Buildings and Grounds Committee reduced the number of building options when they were going through that process to 4. And if my memory serves me correct, each of those included a consolidated elementary at Joy, all of them. I was not in the selection process, but the Buildings and Grounds Committee narrowed it down out of like 20 some options to 4. Each of them, and correct me if my memory is wrong, but I think all of them had consolidated elementary at Joy. So then we worked on the survey to gauge public opinion for months and months and months and months and months, and thought we were never going to find something that we liked. But I do have to say that one board member openly opposed the final proposals with the consolidated elementary at Joy, and that was Mike. And as he has said, I will grant kudos when you're consistent and you don't flip-flop. So, and he wanted all the money to go into the high school from the beginning. In Buildings Grounds Committee meeting, I know I had said, and I remember the principals were there, young families moving into this district are going to be focusing on your elementary schools. What are your elementary schools like? If you're coming in with young kids, that's what you're looking for and what you're focused on. And so if you want to attract young families to move here, that's where your focus should be. And so when I realized, okay, there's no hope for saving all our buildings, I could get behind a consolidated elementary plan. One that included, I could get behind that. So, I mean, I can understand people who want to put all the money in the high school. Who wouldn't want to make your high school the best? I mean, that's just common sense. But when you have to prioritize, why would you sink all of the money into a building the same age and with the same issues as the Joy building that you closed? If you want to sink that much money into a 1956 high school, then you should be consistent. You should want to repair and upgrade Joy. Whatever you deem too expensive to do or to fix in Joy, you shouldn't advocate to fix in the high school, in my opinion. The high school will have the same issues as Joy building, but at a slightly higher rate or cost. From the very beginning, whatever it costs at Joy, it's like 1.1 times as much to do the same thing at the high school. It's always been the trend as long as I've been on the board. As far as a referendum and survey, we had said as a board that we would write a referendum based on the survey results and the direction they pointed us in, and now we're backing away from that. We should still do that, write a referendum on the survey results, and then let the public vote and decide. I mean, just because we write a referendum one way does not mean the public can't say, hey, we don't like that. They can still vote and say that. the thing that really gets me is this next issue. If your main argument for not having the elementary at Joy is the bus ride for 7 miles, I ask you to consider this from another standpoint. Put yourself in the shoes of parents in Drury Township, Rock Island County, Iasb, Henderson County, Keysburg, Hamlet, or Reynolds. Imagine you're the parent who gets a call 3 days before school starts to tell you that your 5 and 6-year-olds will be getting on the bus at 6:20 a.m. or earlier for some. My kids were 6:20. They were not the first ones on the bus. That was the consolidation year. You get the call that your kids will be on the bus almost 2 full hours before school begins. Then imagine you are that parent and you hear others upset over a 7-mile bus ride. To be blunt, it's almost like a slap in the face. A 7-mile bus trip would be a happy blessing. For 13 years, rural parents have complained. For 13 years. At this point, they have given up. All the rural parents I talk to tell me there's no point saying anything because no one cares. The problem has been around since consolidation, yet nothing has been done, even before the driver shortage. And so that argument is a little, I understand. If you've never had your kids ride a bus before, it is a hard thing to adapt to, probably. I can understand having a big change, but there's also the opposite side, whose kids have been riding the bus for nearly 2 hours, including the wait time in there, getting on the bus almost 2 hours before school starts. So it's a totally different perspective when you look at it from that parent's point of view. I truly believe a consolidated elementary is the best thing academically. Whether you can overcome the logistics of it for the public is another matter. Do I want a town to lose a school? Heck no. I was in school when Eliza closed and Keysburg closed. My parents were terrified to have me to go to New Boston because we would go from 13 kids in a class. My classroom had 36. If you've ever been in Mrs. Carey's or what used to be Mrs. Shepard's, which is now Mrs. Is it Mrs. Matlick's room? We had 36 kids in each one of those rooms when we consolidated, and that's a scary thing. So I've lived through that. The Eliza community that I came from was devastated when the school was closed. It was only 30 years old, 30-year-old building, and they closed it. Granted, numbers were down. So I can understand, I mean, lived through it. But I don't want a school or a town to lose a school, but again, what's best academically for the kids? Our school district is pretty lucky. We're able to keep our class numbers, the individual classroom size numbers, relatively small. We get extra money in the funding formula for keeping our class numbers under a certain level. And that should be a really high priority for us to keep the small class sizes. If I had my pick, I would go back to what Tammy Parcher brought to us. Yeah, and you guys probably all figured out I shared that with her back when I proposed it last February. About my idea of keeping the elementaries, but tearing down the 3-story part of Joy and putting up a new junior high. That could have solved almost all the problems, and it would be a lot less expensive. We would have a smaller amount to put towards a new school, so that you could divvy up the rest around the other buildings. But, probably the only one that thinks that way. So, I don't want the towns to lose a school, but if you looked at the survey results, the teachers, and yes, there are individual teachers who do not agree, but the large majority of the teachers said a consolidated elementary would help the kids academically. And that's in the survey results, the public ones. You can go and look for yourself. I've shared those with people I've talked to. So, honestly, with the new information that Mr. Petrie's brought to us, I don't think it's wise to take a vote on anything tonight. I think we should take a wait and see approach to see if we can manage to get a school construction grant if this process gets going. If we're postponing a vote on a referendum from June to April, you're looking at, what, 9 months, 10 months? I think it's worth waiting if we can get half of a new building from the state. The state's been really lacking since Knoxville built their high school. They, in 1972, changed the Constitution of the state of Illinois. People of Illinois said they wanted the state to provide a majority of the funding for education. We're lucky if we get 30%, 33% funding. And so this could be a way for the state to make that up to us. So I think a wait and see approach would be, but and I was so thankful for the people who came and talked to me in the last month, because talking face to face is so much easier than messages or emails or whatever. And I'm so thankful for those who had talked to me. And I'm headed to say that because I know some of you are here today. And but I just think a wait and see approach would be wise. You rush into something you can't. Well, I guess you could undo it, but someone who voted in favor of this motion would have to make a motion to repeal it or to change it, and so I think a wait and see approach would be best at this time.
Any further discussion on it?
Myself, once again, I'm listening to Julie's comments, other comments. You know, I grew up in the country. I went to Perryton. When I went to school, there was Perryton, Ohio Grove, Seton, Frew, and then they came up with Apollo. I got to finish Apollo 4th and 5th, and then they closed Perryton, Frew, and Apollo, and eventually Seton was closed. So, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's the sign of living in rural America. It's part of it. The junior high I went to, the old junior high building, I was on the committee that helped put this school here right now. Don't think there wasn't comments, complaints, and the same people that were mad about their taxes in 1999 and what this was going to do to Aledo was going to be the end of Aledo. How much this was going to cost to build this new school. If you drive by that one, it says 1907 on it. I'm surprised it's still standing, but it is. So the facts of what we're going through right now, as far as the recommendation that we made and we followed, that Ray told us, was the Joy School should be left. That was their recommendation based on their opinion. So that's why we acted on what we did and started building onto this building. I'm positive that's why we did it. It wasn't unanimous. These decisions are not going to be unanimous. The rest of it, busing, I only live 4 miles outside of town. We got on at 20 till 7. And for whatever reason, I was the unlucky kid. I was the first one on, the last one off. But that's back when every 80 acres you stopped and picked up a kid because there was a house there. And our bus was clear full. And unfortunately, if you live in the country, you're going to ride a bus. I can't do anything. If that problem was there 12 years ago, then I guess transportation-wise, we need to be working harder to fix that. Now we know the transportation problems we have today, that probably not going to get any better. So the recommendation Mike's talking about, and whether anyone thinks I've said that from the beginning, that is my feeling. I feel we need the 2 grade schools, the size of the district. I understand that there's still going to be some kids that live in this township you're talking about, or the township, whatever. You were the furthest away and you lived down the furthest next to Little York. You felt like you had the furthest to go. So those decisions, unfortunately, and I understand the administration talking about what you think is best for the kids. Once again, I went through the group where we were in 5 different schools. I understand that standpoint. I think you have your reasons, and I'm sure statistically you have reasons that you can prove to us that that's the answer. But from where we stand and looking at the money available for us to take that risk, it's not there. We know we can put $1 million and some dollars into the Apollo building. The New Boston building needs less than $2 million. I've spoke to multiple of you. I want us to do a lot more in New Boston to try to get out of the 1930 some or whatever age building. I don't know if you ever looked up what it was.
I didn't have a chance
Couldn't get it there.
to check on your question about
the
if it's
age.
even
I just
over.
asked the age. So, I mean, those are my comments. I think we all have opinions based on our own personal feelings. I've had tons of people reach out to me on the subject. I'm with Bill. I've had the majority of my folks that have reached out to me ask me to keep the 2 grade schools open. From the mayor of New Boston, from the Aledo mayor, to many other folks that I work around on a daily basis. So with that being said, I make a motion not to combine Apollo, New Boston Elementary Schools, and I'd like to see them remain the way they are. That's my motion.
I'll second it.
So would this motion be binding, say a referendum passes, and we're not going to write a referendum based on the survey results? Is that, what does this mean? That, in effect?
Well, I don't know that we'd need a referendum. If we have the money, we can make this decision. That's my take on it.
So we would not even bother offering a referendum for the public then?
We wouldn't need to ask for any additional money, so really no need for a referendum.
So then the decision would be based totally on what the 7 of us say,
Well, I wouldn't,
on the direction of the district.
I actually wouldn't say that. I'd say, you know, that we've been at it for a year and a half, 2 years, and then we all agreed that the last meeting we had more people here than we did in both of the survey forums. And I don't know what or why the community seemed like they woke up, and you know, and so we have the petition that we all got, and I didn't count how many are there. It looks like it's 600 or 700 people. There are some people that, when you look at it, are not in our district for certain. They look like names that maybe have lived here in the past and moved away. But you have that. We've all had a lot of people reach out to us. The survey itself did weigh slightly on being consolidated. However, that survey went out, and Bill said it, it's our fault, but that survey went out gearing towards the consolidation.
In your opinion?
In Bray's opinion, so we don't have to get into that.
Bray's opinion? No, not Bray's
Well,
opinion.
the one thing
So-
we made it seem like is that we could build an elementary school for 17 million or spend 17 million on fixing up the 2 elementary schools. And we all know that that's not the case. They don't need 17 million to fix the 2 grade schools, but that's what the survey said.
Because the dollar amount was geared towards making the 2 elementaries up to the par of a new elementary. That was why those numbers were the way they were.
And-
That was my understanding.
And so, with this motion, so we don't need to ask for the money. This motion would basically, we would be voting on making the decision that we were going to look at the referendum. And I think, at least in my understanding, and what I wouldn't, to keep 2 schools that we already have, I feel like we can make that decision based on all the feedback and everything we've got. If we were gonna build a new school, I think that I would want to reach out. But here's the thing, we all thought that survey, at least I did, I shouldn't speak for everybody. My hope and my thought was when we put that survey out, and it would be a landslide one way or another, but it wasn't. And so a referendum could put us in the same position, just delay us by another, you know, however many months, and put us in the same predicament where it's split down the middle. And so,
Plus, we know financially we cannot do both.
Not
Yeah,
get
Pretty
the
much,
help, say,
we're pretty much done at the high school, unless the state thing comes through.
yeah.
And you know how we stack up against Naperville. It's not ever a good situation. No, we're at the bottom of the
Right.
pecking order.
Right, and so even if we go to the consolidated, we would have to flip what Mr. Petrie and Ray have come up with on focusing on some of the high school right now is what you were sharing, and I do appreciate you guys working on that. So it gives us another option, basically. All right, any other discussion?
I think this is way too, not wise.
Okay, so
Take a vote.
we had a motion and we had a second. roll call, please. And Reed, can you state the,
Barry motion, Smock seconded not to combine Apollo and Boston Elementary Schools.
I would like to move to postpone this matter indefinitely.
do I have a second on that?
It definitely can be brought up at any time by any board member in the future.
Okay. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Bounds,
Yes.
Munson,
No.
Smock,
Yes.
Wagner,
No.
Yates, Ballmer,
Yes, I think.
Barry.
Yes.
And of course Don's not here. Mike.
And I did, just for the other board's information and everybody, I did talk to Dominic in depth about this. I think he talked to you too, Mr. Petrie, is that correct?
Yes.
And he's unable to attend tonight, but he was aware of it. So. All right. Moving to item number 10, administrative reports. Is there any additions?
I got a couple quick things. Ethan Munson qualified for wrestling state. He'll wrestle 120 pounds starting tomorrow.
You see the fire escort out of town?
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, oh gosh, there's a fire.
Right. We are hosting first round of boys basketball regionals at our place on Saturday at 5 versus Canton. We've got FFA banquet coming up March 3rd at 6. I think either it was in the board packet or we sent out separate emails for you. We'll do presentation in the auditorium and then a dinner afterwards. And then our spring musical 9 to 5 is coming up the second week of March, like March 10th through the 12th-ish. Those details are coming. So.
And I was trying to find that, but is there an RSVP for the FFA?
Just email the ag teachers.
Yeah, any of the ag teachers. They're a little nervous about, because their numbers have grown, so we're a little nervous about how many people we got coming. If you've ever been to our cafeteria, it doesn't seat a lot of people at one time.
Mr. Hart and I are potentially working on an alternative plan.
Him and I have been talking about some options too. But I think, we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. But
I would add to the junior high, kind of what Julie brought up, the 7th grade scholastic bowl and bringing home the travel banner. Just overall, students in our school are being extremely successful everywhere they go. To where I think we have 4 or 5 travel banners where the hallways get full, and that's the best it's been since I've been here. So kind of kudos to all the kids. And then a big pat on the back to Brandon Hoffman and the 8th grade team that represented us at the state tournament Saturday, losing to Topolis, that ended up winning their nightcap game to go to the state championship Thursday. Heck of a team, but our kids represented our school with plastic and they did a nice job down there. And I believe that's the first time in school, any of the school's history, not 100% sure, to make it to that level.
Alito 2009, they made it.
To the same level?
Yeah, they made it to state. It was in the program, that's the only reason I do. They gave that little program at our history. We had 1 appearance, and then in 1953, Alito got 2nd place. Bill Brown, he posted that on Facebook months ago. But yeah, so they got 2nd place, but Teutopolis has been there 9 times.
They go off.
Yeah, so they were at home, even though they weren't home.
But then also just the overall idea of community support and what was able to be created. I know parents put a lot of work into that. We did the pep rally and did a tour through Alito, see those schools. So pretty good send off for those kids.
Yeah, and I would just kind of tag onto that. It was great. If anybody that didn't have the opportunity to be at the basketball game, the high school basketball game, first off we won, which was great. But they announced the little kids. They had the 7th and 8th graders out there. It was a great night for our community. I thought it just really was. business? Accept a motion to go into closed session.
I move to go into closed session. Second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Let's meet back at 8.
You got a lot of documents.
Yeah, let's meet at 8:30.